Hi, in this video we are going to talk about how to heal the wounded masculine. My name is Christopher and I'm a therapist who works with men, and in this video we're going to talk a little bit about the wounded masculine and sort of how we can go about working with it and bringing some healing to it. And to start out this video, I do want to bring a quote to light that I think really helps shed a little bit of insight into sort of what we're dealing with here. This quote comes from the poet Robert Bly. And Robert Bly says to us, "When men can't grieve, turn their grief into violence against others." And I think that that's very beautiful. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but in our culture, we as men have lost the ability to grieve. It's not a part of our society today. And so when we talk about the wounded masculine, I think it's important that we just kind of outline a little bit about what the masculine actually is. What are we talking about here? And when we talk about these psychological structures of masculine and feminine, we're talking from a conceptual lens. So there will be labeling, there will be identifying, but in actuality, the masculine and feminine are more fluid energies. And we're once again trying to label something that by its very nature doesn't have a label, but it's the way that we understand with our mind. And so just to sort of bring a little bit of conceptual awareness to what the masculine is, when we talk about the masculine, we're talking about the part of the psyche that brings a couple of different features. One, this is the part of the psyche that perhaps brings direction and clarity. This is the ability to focus, the ability to create order or pursue meaning. Another element of the masculine within the psyche is this idea of consciousness and structure. It brings light into the unconscious, it defines boundaries. It's the aspect of our psyche that can bring some light, that of the known world, our ego consciousness, so to speak. It's the part of our psyche that also brings discipline and action, the part of our psyche that allows for us to create goals, to have routines, to set limits, etc. It's the part of us that can also go into truth as well. It's the part of our psyche that seeks to understand the illusion, to analyze, to sort of make meaning and piece together that of a chaotic and unknown universe. And it's also this idea of the sacred protector, the part of our psyche that protects us, that keeps us safe in situations, psychological, spiritual, physical, sexual, mental, whatever it is. It's the part of us that keeps us safe, that helps us to set boundaries in our life and hold those boundaries. When the masculine is healed, there are a couple of sort of features that you can see in somebody who has a healed masculine. They are clear, present, they're protective without being domineering, they're grounded in purpose, and they're in service to love and truth. Now, when the masculine is unhealed, you can find somebody that is controlling, emotionally cut off, disconnected from their feminine, hyper rational, having the inability to sort of see subtlety or hold paradox, somebody who's an extreme rationalist, perhaps, somebody who's addicted to achievement, somebody who is in pursuit of domination. These are all stemming from what we would call the wounded masculine. And many of these elements have been running our cultures and societies for the last 2,000 plus years. So when we talk about the psyche, I'm just going to kind of read some of this here of what the wounded masculine actually is. It's the part of the psyche that carries shame, rage, fear, and disconnection. It shows up as emotional numbing, control, passivity, aggression, addiction, and constant performance. Men stuck here often feel lost, not good enough, or overly dependent on approval from others. And so, how does the wounded masculine develop? Well, there are a couple different ways. So, we have what we might call like the father wound, for example, the direct relationship to the father that we had or didn't have in our life. Typically, there's some sort of wounding that occurs in every single one of us. And with the father wound in particular, typically this has to do with abandonment, whether physical or emotional abandonment, the two different forms of abandonment. Maybe we didn't have a father in the household, or maybe we did have a father, yet they weren't emotionally available. Many of the men I work with have very few instances where they've actually seen their father cry, which is heartbreaking because it means that we've grown up in families where it wasn't okay for men to feel their emotions. And that's part of where the toxicity comes from. That's part of where the wounded masculine comes from, is the fact that we have an inability to grieve, an inability to tap into our emotions because nobody ever taught us how to do so. Another element that could create the wounded masculine is actually the mother wound. Having a father who isn't emotionally present in the house, maybe some of us gravitated towards the mother a little bit too much or the feminine, which isn't a bad thing. You know, it's okay to be connected to the feminine. However, it's important that we also have connection to the masculine as well. And typically, the way that this shows up in unhealthy ways is through enmeshment, meaning having a mother maybe who's overbearing or overprotective. Maybe, we have a man who's, connected to their mother in an unhealthy way, consistently checking up, meeting her needs all the time, has become a surrogate spouse in some regard. And this is an unhealthy relationship and causes insecurity in the boy, eventually in the man, and creates an element here of the wounded masculine. Another reason we have sort of this wounded feminine, wounded masculine, the father wound and the mother wound here is that we have a lack of initiation in our culture as well. Typically in tribal cultures, boys would be removed from the family, from the society, and taken out and initiated into the realm of manhood. And because we don't have that today, the psyche is yearning for something. The psyche can feel that there's something off. And because we don't have that masculine split, that's also how that mother wound can develop, is that we become too absorbed in the feminine. We don't leave the womb, we don't leave the mother to actually enter into the masculine, into adulthood, into manhood. And then, of course, many of us grew up just shame for feeling. And the feeling and the intuitive part is traditionally the feminine. However, the masculine needs to have that feminine there in order to be healed. It is the secure feminine that heals the wounded masculine, and the secure masculine that heals the wounded feminine. And so we need to have the ability to feel, to intuit. And many of us as boys were shamed for, maybe expressing emotion. Man up, stop crying, don't be a girl, directly shaming the feminine, that aspect of ourselves that is responsible for feeling, that part of us that connects deeply with our emotions and our body and our intuition, which is extremely important. And these elements are usually shamed by, the wounded masculine. And of course, we have the societal conditioning as well that says, in order to be a successful man, we must have, money, or that values and that our value is in our ability to perform. There isn't emotional presence or even integrity shown in our society today. We also have a lack of male role models to really look after and to see. And so I think that that sort of creates very unhealthy dynamics inside of our culture that leads to the wounded masculine. And so how do we begin to identify the wounded masculine inside of ourselves? Well, we can ask ourselves a couple different questions. And one of these questions is, do I always feel the pressure to be a rock for everybody else? Do I have to solve everybody else's problem? Is it on me? And this dynamic stems from early childhood conditioning of needing to be the rock for the family in some way, that the child becomes sort of the pillar of the chaos and the emotional dysregularity that's happening all around them. Another way you can identify if there's some wounded masculine is by asking yourself, do you hide your pain in anger, in work, or in isolation? Because we heal, together in community. An easy identifier here is, do I have difficulty in expressing my emotions or asking for help? This is a sure sign that there's an element of the wounded masculine. The healed masculine is able to be present, is able to connect with their emotions, is able to feel what's going on, and in safe spaces is able to express. I think it's very important that we as men learn to find circles of other men where we can grieve and be vulnerable and receive support from others, because we're social creatures. We don't have the ability to do everything by ourselves. We are dependent on others. We're dependent on this universe. And coming to sense and surrender to the fact that we are dependent on this universe. We require oxygen to breathe. We require food in order to power our bodies. We require other people to have emotional connection. And that's okay. We're not meant to be in isolation. And another way that you can tell that you might have some wounded masculine as well is through addiction. If we have unhealthy habit patterns with pornography, with women or other men, or drugs and alcohol, or work, or video games, or whatever our particular coping mechanism is, that means that we're out of balance in some way. And typically what these addictions are trying to do are to cope and to soothe the pain that's going on inside of us. Once again, because nobody ever taught us to feel this pain. In tribal cultures and ancient times of our ancestors, there would be ceremony. There would be times when we were able to wail, to grieve, to actually express what's going on. Much of the grief that we have is held on from our childhood. Maybe nobody actually checked in on us to ask us how we were doing. Maybe there are certain events in our life that we didn't have the ability to emotionally process, and those events become stuck. They become lodged inside of our body. And so it's up to us to go back, to heal, to work through some of these emotions that have become repressed. Another good question is, do I seek validation from women or from work? Do I seek validation in my performance? That's a really good way to tell if we have a wounded masculine in some way as well. And so how do we begin to heal it? The first thing is to start feeling and not fixing. We don't need to fix ourselves. We're not broken. We're human. And it's important that we just start feeling. And one of the best ways we can go about doing that is in community with others, working with a therapist, working in a group therapy, working in a 12-step group or some kind of emotional support group, a men's group, some way that we can start tapping into our emotions to express ourselves, to have somebody and other men hold space for us is some of the best ways that we can start healing the wounded masculine, to be around other men, to reclaim some of the father energy, to find older men who are positive, healthy role models that we can connect to, who we can start receiving some of that fatherly guidance from in some capacity, to reconnect with a healthy form of the masculine. If we have a father wound, well, it's required that we work with other men to begin to heal this father wound. We're not going to do this all by ourselves. I think that's the biggest point here, is that we heal together in connection, in community with other people. It requires a village in order to work through some of this stuff. Another great way to work with this is just through ritual and reflection, by journaling, by starting to connect with yourself, by meditating, having, a disciplined morning routine. It doesn't need to be anything super strenuous, but just having some sort of ritual and connection where you can begin to start tapping in, tuning in, and feeling maybe connection to nature, to the feminine. That is the paradox here, is that in order to heal the masculine, we do have to heal the feminine. That's the part that the masculine is berating, that intuitive part. Connecting with our inner child, that part of us that's scared, and just asking for somebody to comfort them and to tell them that everything's okay. I'm okay. Some of the ways that I go about doing this personally is I actually physically touch myself. I know my inner child loves physical touch, and so I will soothe myself in various ways. And this is easier said than done. It is a practice. I mean, it's a lifelong practice of self-soothing. And ultimately, if we want to be of support and help others in the world, we do need to take care of ourselves first and really learn how to find security and soothing in who we are. And honestly, one of the best things that we can do is, like I mentioned before, is to stop doing this alone. Being a lone wolf, being, isolated, that's the old survival mechanism. Learning to connect with others is really the path of healing when it comes to working with the wounded masculine. And if you are looking for anyone to work with, I specialize in working with men one-on-one. If you feel called to connect, I'll include my booking link down below. Feel free to schedule a call with me, and I look forward to catching you in the next one. Take care.